being born and dying are the two things that we can rely on in life. So, you know, why is that conversation so difficult for us? Why do we wait until we're thrown into that world to talk about mortality?
Yeah.
Not for everybody, but I generally say that's the case, isn't it?
Yes, definitely for me.
Yeah.
So let's discuss mortality now. I think it's a really important part, and I'm glad you brought it up. And so when we don't think about it as human beings that much, and it always seems to be something that you only think about it when it suddenly appears. But we've talked about on these talks before about how it changes when perhaps you don't just get it, you don't learn about it slowly through. We talked before about pets, and then a grandparent, then maybe a parent, and then you suddenly might you're kind of led into learning about your mortality in a gentle way sometimes. But actually, there's a difference when it's when you're younger and it's suddenly flipped over, and suddenly you're forced to learn about it. And you brought up a lovely point about why don't we talk about it? So how
because it shouldn't be scary. I think this is the thing, and it's the one thing that the one thing that we know will happen, and I find it extraordinary that that you might be in a marriage and not know what your partner's wishes are for a funeral or to be buried or cremated. And equally, you may not know yourself, but to have those conversations about you know, for all of us, for organ donation, or where would we want to be, or what would we want to achieve, and you know, all of those things. I think really we should talk right from when we're little, so that it isn't a terrifying experience. And I think that life shapes us, isn't it? So it depends on what happens to you in your life or your family's life. So someone may have an illness when they're younger, so you would have that reference point, or they might know someone who had a bad accident, or you know, something like that, or they may live with a chronic condition, you know. So it's you can draw on to have those conversations. I think it helps for children to be able to say, well, you remember
Definitely.
so and so, or you know, that's where those conversations can be easier by drawing on experiences. But I think to be able to talk about the cycle of life in an open and kind, and I know in our hospital there was a patient last week who said it's their next adventure, you know, and that is you know, that's not a concept that everyone can relate to, and some people might be quite offended by that, but some people might be like, okay, you know, and I think also about spirituality, it's something that we should just talk about, and you know, so that we are aware of people's wishes, and it might not be until they are faced with a diagnosis or prognosis such as this that they even question. I remember a young woman who was in her 30s, and I asked, we do a holistic needs assessment, and I asked about if she had a faith, and she said, no, but I wish I did, you know. And then it opened up a conversation about mindfulness and meditation, and you know, it was something that she hadn't meditated before. And I think that that's something that we as healthcare professionals aren't very necessarily comfortable about talking about. But
can I ask Sarah, so when we're thinking about the what we want and things, are these discussions you've had with your partner? Like, are they things that have cropped up?
Yes. As I was saying earlier, I've always been quite closed about death and dying, never really spoken about it.
Before your diagnosis?
Before my diagnosis, and since my diagnosis, really regret it, because, for example, with my children, you know, there's a dead bumblebee, but I would say, oh, it's a bit poorly, and we'd keep going. And so then when I came to say I'm poorly, and you think, oh, but they've just, you know, poorly means not moving, and so I really regretted it. And when I started exploring it, because like you say, it was thrown at me, I actually appreciate now that I do talk about it, because I thought, oh gosh, how awful would I feel if, God forbid, it was the other way round, and I don't know whether they would have preferred a cremation or to be buried, and that's an added pressure for everybody left behind. And I don't even know the answer for myself. I've written everything down that I'd like, for example, fancy dress at my funeral. You know, really silly things just to take some of that pressure away, because I don't want anybody thinking, did I get it right? You know, did I do it? And letters, cards, my kids have got huge memory books of silly things. For example, my eldest said to me, I love you, mummy, and I said, I love you too, and she said, copycat, and walked away. Something that was really funny to me at the time, and just writing it down for her to remember, and for her to know little snippets of what our life was like together, you know, things that we did, photographs. They've got a box of things for them in the future that are meaningful to me, that is meaningful to them. Had I have been hit by a bus tomorrow, they wouldn't have any of that, and they wouldn't, I don't feel they'd have that strong connection with me still without me being here. Whereas I hope, my intentions are, that the books, the photographs, the memories are there, you know. And also, again, someone said to me the other day, we're in danger of our children never being able to access our photos
because they're on your
because
iCloud,
it's on your phone, on the cloud, and that really struck a nerve with me, because it was actually a photographer that told me, and her brother sadly passed away quite suddenly, and they had to send the hard drives away, and they still can't access any of his photos, because he was, you know, a computer king, and is encrypted them so much that they can't get them. And again, it was something that now I know I can prepare for, and I've written it down. I've told everybody, you must, you know, this is where all the photos are.
And if we had more conversations about it, about mortality in like different cultures, it's just part of death is part of living, or it's just and it sounds so arbitrary to say journey, but we are on a journey, aren't we? Metaphorically and literally.
A to B.
And so I think that if we incorporated it into not being macabre or morbid, I see it as live, you know, you're saying about living your best life, whatever that means. And if we had those conversations more in whatever circumstances we're in, then it would be much less terrifying, I think.
It's that old cliche, isn't it? Life is a gift, and it is, like you were saying, it's uncertainty for everybody. Nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, but we don't talk about it. And I, since the diagnosis, having talked about it, feel much more comfortable with it all.
And from a psychological point of view, as a nurse, I see that you can visibly, you palpably,
control, I think,
you can see people being calmer, because actually, what am I frightened about? Are you frightened about pain? Okay, I'll talk you through that.
And I think it's that control of, you know, I may not be here, but I've controlled what's going to happen. And that helps a bit. And
you were saying about writing, you know, you've written letters to your girls on their wedding day and on different key moments, and but equally, that won't work for everyone. I suggested to a patient who's got young children about writing a letter to her children. She said, I don't really like writing. I don't want to do that. And I was like, yeah, okay. But so that doesn't work. But actually, I think that it can be a really powerful way.
And videos as well, with technology now, you know, you can do it all via video.
And equally, I know a friend whose father died last year, and she was very sad that she didn't have a letter. And I think that, so it's what works for one person might not work for another, but I think that to have the choice,
it's definitely a subject that needs to be talked about.
There's this book called Being Mortal. I don't know if you read it. Oh, you've got it down. It's a wonderful read, and I think I told you to read that, Jemima, didn't I? I didn't read it, did she? You've got it. Didn't read it. Didn't bother. But that's a fantastic book
Yeah.
at talking about mortality, isn't it? And finding and talking about, and that's from a surgeon's point of view, and never look like.
Oh, it's very powerful.
Yeah, very
I look
powerful.
forward to reading that one.
But we'll come on to books and things at the end. But I do want to touch on, like, we've talked about mortality, and you've mentioned already once about bucket lists, and I think it is something to talk about, because that's something that sometimes people are spurred to do of going. And we had Greg Trout. And he had a slightly different take on bucket lists, and I just wanted to ask, so did you write a list? Was that something that you did?
I did write a small list. It was mainly focused around the children,
Yes.
you know, things that we could do as a family. And I intended on writing another list. My intentions were get to the end of that bucket list for the year, so it was things like my youngest started nursery. I wanted to be there when she started nursery.
Yes.
And then my intentions were to write a new list. But then I discovered that actually you don't need a bucket list. It's about living. Just live life, you know, the simple things. I enjoy walking my children to and from school. Those sorts of things are on my bucket list, because they're just key everyday aspects of life that we take for granted and don't enjoy the simple pleasures. And
which is the one thing that Greg was talking about when he was on this very sofa. And we were discussing, so 101, isn't it, things to do before you die? And
No, 101 things to do when you survive.
When you survive, okay.
Oh.
But so he's, that's terrible, I got that wrong, isn't it? But his realisation was that thing.
Yeah.
If he came up with, he sang on the Sydney Opera House stage, and he did all these massive things, but actually it was those little things. He's got a little boy now, and it's just spending the day with him is the thing. So
definitely.
The very fact, though, that we know what a bucket list is,
Totally.
it suggests that we are, you know, ever the optimist I am, but that we are getting better at talking about it, and it's only through conversations like this, or, you know, your blog, your book, you know, that we know what that is, and then when we have a word for it, we're more comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, my 84-year-old dad would know what a bucket list is.
Yeah.
I'm sure when he was 24 that didn't, you know, term didn't exist. So I think that.
Yeah, I was going to say that I've been using, for years now, I've been using the word eulogy as the theatre show, the eulogy of Toby Peach. And I've been using that word because it was looking at mortality, and actually, but the definition of a eulogy is a celebration of life.
Yeah,
and actually, we should be eulogising our
that's
lives
really
every
nice.
day.
Yeah.
And what happens if you learn that at one point someone's going to eulogise you and you want to do it yourself?
Yeah.
And those words that are seen as the only things that we know when it's to do with dying, but actually are about living, and the way that we've lived is, it's an interesting thing.